What's up, guys? Michael Corsentino with my July 2018 lighting tutorial for BehindTheShutter.com and Shutter Magazine. If you guys are enjoying these tutorials as much as I hope you are, you'll want to do yourself a favor and head over to BehindTheShutter.com so you can set yourself up with a subscription to the print magazine so that you can get a more awesome photography education delivered right to your door every month. This month's tutorial is a shout out and a reminder to all of those people who identify themselves as available light shooters that strobe is available light. That's right, I said it. Whether you're using the sun or you're using strobes, it's all just light. So what I want to try and do here is demystify the use of strobes and flash, because I think that's what's holding a lot of people back. Now, this whole tutorial is an outgrowth of a workshop that I recently taught in Iowa, and you're going to be seeing images shot by those people, not by me, because that was the whole mission of the workshop, was to show up, not bring any of my gear, but use only what they had. So we're going to be working with inexpensive equipment, and many of the people very light, if any, flash experience at all. So because that's just not what they were comfortable with. They were only comfortable using quote unquote available light. But again, what I like to say is that strobe is an available light because it's a light source and it's available, and you should use it when it's necessary. Sometimes you don't want to use it, but sometimes you definitely will benefit from using it. So that's what we're going to look at. And I'm just going to show you how there are a lot of things that you can't do just with the sun. And there are sometimes you can do great things with the sun, but you want to be able to have as many tools at your disposal as possible. And photography, as we're going to talk about, is all about light and shadow. And so you really want to be able to bring to bear, be able to control light and shadow. And using strobe is really going to give you maximum control over all of that. Let's move on to the next slide here, where I talk about the real reason that you want to use strobe is it gives you the ability to work with the light you want rather than the light that you're given. And that really is it in a nutshell, okay? When you're working with the sun only, with available light only, you have only one light source to work with, one zone to work with, and basically you have to work with the prevailing lighting conditions, and that's it. So if you want something different than what the sun is giving, than the ambient lighting conditions are giving you, basically you're out of luck. Okay, so I was able to show these folks, and I'm going to be able to show you just by introducing strobe. We're going to look at just the ambient shots, and then we're going to look at what happens when you introduce strobe, and you're going to see how vastly different you can make the result just by introducing with a few simple lighting techniques and the introduction of strobe. All of a sudden you have something completely different than what you have if you just have available light. If you're just able to work with available light. So, and sometimes available light is great, and it's going to give you exactly what you want. But what happens when it doesn't? What happens when it's not cooperating? What happens when it's overcast? Or what happens when the sun is too bright or harsh, or whatever? You need to have tools and techniques at your disposal that will allow you to work around those obstacles. But also, if you have a creative vision that's different, you need to be able to create that on the fly, and that's where strobe really shines. Okay, so again, just to recap what I said before, is that photography, when you think about it, is highlights and shadows, and available light gives you only one kind of highlight and shadow at a given moment. Okay, now that may be perfect, like I said, but what if it's not? Now, strobe allows you to control the quality of light, the hardness and softness of the shadows, etc. Okay, how much shadow you have, whether you want shadow or not, all of those kinds of things. So I say, why not have as many tools and techniques at your disposal? Again, sometimes natural light is beautiful and you can't beat it, and you need to know when not to turn on your flash as much as you need to know when to turn on your flash. But don't be intimidated by strobe. It's just light. And just like available light, it's an available light. And that's why I keep saying that. So let's take a look. Let's dig in and take a look at some of the differences. Okay, so lighting options. Just with available light. So that's on the left. We've got one zone of light only. So basically, we are stuck with the prevailing ambient conditions. That's all we have to work with. If there's too little sun, we have bad photos. If there's too much sun, we have bad photos. Okay? We can only shoot when the lighting is ideal, more often than not. Okay? Now, when we have ambient light as well as strobe together, we have two independent zones of light that we're able to balance. And that is really where the magic comes in. All right. So you can create the light that you want when you work this way, because you can balance the ambient and the flash, and you can create all sorts of looks from something very moody and dramatic to just a subtle kiss of light. You can fill in the shadows. Like I said here, you can just put in a little kiss of light. You can overpower the sun. You can hold background and sky detail. You can shoot wide open. If you, let's say you bring in high-speed sync that allows you to use really fast shutter speeds and shoot wide open. Great for portrait work. You can employ creative use of gels, and you can shoot when and where you want. Okay, so very different. So you can see they both have their their uses, but you really want to have both at your disposal, especially if you're doing this professionally. All right, let's dig into our images. I've got 4 different locations, 4 sets of images to show you, each with before and after. So we're going to start off with just the ambient exposure, and then I'm going to show you what happens when we introduce strobe and how we can make the images very different. Okay, so these were, just give a shout out to Estelle. Estelle Nestor shot these. I'm not going to try and pronounce your your last name, Estelle, so forgive me. So here you see on the left, you see the ambient exposure, right? Now, perfectly fine, and this is what Estelle would normally shoot because this is what she's comfortable with. And I said, well, why don't you employ strobes? She has strobes, but she just doesn't really feel comfortable, or didn't feel comfortable using them. And that's why she would never really bring them out, because, you know, you get comfortable with what you know, and you don't want to step outside your comfort zone when you're in the middle of a shoot. So I always say, you know, don't try new things when you're working. You know, do your tests, get comfortable with it, and then bring it out. And that's one of the benefits of workshops, obviously. So by just, getting her comfortable with this, and by showing her, what you can do with strobe, it really was eye-opening for her. And that's what I'm hoping to do for you guys as well. Okay. So again, here we have our ambient, perfectly fine, but let's look at what happens when we introduce 2 strobes. Very different, right? Okay. So all that we did was we introduced a strobe in the back with a CTO gel. I'm going to show you a lighting diagram for this as well. And then we have a strobe camera right as well with a softbox, an Octabank, and I'm going to show that to you. I have a whole gear slide at the end of this presentation. But so you can see here, we've got a very, very different thing. Now the image on the right, the image with strobes, would not be possible with ambient light alone. And that is really what this, if you take away one thing from this whole tutorial, it's that, is that with strobe, you are able to create light, a quality of light and images that you are unable to create with ambient light alone. When you want, like if you had this quality of light happening, with ambient light, then great. But you can see here on the left that the quality of light that we had with the ambient light that was existing on location is very different. Not what we had. So absent flashes, we would be stuck with what we had on the left. And maybe that's what you want, and that's great. But what if you want something more dramatic and something more, edgy and sophisticated looking, editorial looking, like we have here on the right, okay? Now, this was made by someone who had very little experience using Flash, but with a little bit of stepping outside of her comfort zone and a little bit of help along the way and guidance from someone who from me, you're able to really produce very, very striking images. Okay, let's take a look at behind the scenes and a lighting diagram of how this was created. All right, so here you can see the strobe in the back with a CTO gel. That is a color temperature orange gel, and we're using that to replicate the warm afternoon glow of the sun because we didn't have that. We're in an alley, so the sun is hidden. All we have is just ambient light, but we don't have any direct sun to serve as a backlight. So by employing a strobe with a CTO gel, we're able to create that look. Okay, and you can see that here. That's just putting light there. All right, and then we've got our Octabank here. This is a Rotolux 27.5 Octa by Elechrome, and that is giving us, that's acting as our key light. Okay, and this is basically a cross lighting arrangement. It's a classic lighting pattern that I use constantly on location. It's a go-to, works every time. I encourage you to try it. It works like a gem. All right, so let's go back and take a look at here's our final. Okay, so here's where we started off. We can go back to that, and here's where we ended up. All right, so very, very different. All right, that's location 1. You can see how cool that is. Let's get rid of that. And we'll move on to our next. So the next location was in front of a contemporary modern office building style. So here's where we started off. Again, these are Estelle's images. And you can see here that what we have going on with just our ambient exposure. All right. So let's take a look at what we can do when we introduce Flash. So here on the right, you can see what we've been able to do with Flash. So I've been able to turn the ambient blue by simply changing the camera's white balance to tungsten instead of daylight or flash, changing it to tungsten, which is going to shift all of the ambient light, all of the daylight to blue. And then we're using a CTO gel on the strobe, which is coming in from camera left, and that is balancing our subject. That's bringing our subject back into proper color balance, okay? Because it's a tungsten gel, and we're using a tungsten white balance. All the ambient light is going blue, but everything illuminated by that tungsten gel is properly balanced for a tungsten white balance. Okay, makes sense? I hope so. Try it. Maybe it sounds a little wacky, but it works, and it's really cool, especially cool for seniors, and cool, moody industrial portraits and that sort of thing. Let's take a look at a lighting diagram. Okay, here we are. So you can see here what we're doing. We have our strobe, and we've got our CTO gel in front of it. We're using tungsten white balance on the camera, and everything that is illuminated by that strobe is going to be naturally in proper, not naturally, but in proper white balance, okay? And you can see here, he's in proper white balance. Skin tones look natural, a little warm, but natural, not blue, let's put it that way. And then here in the background, we've got all of this cool blue tone because we're using tungsten white balance, and that shifts everything blue. All right, that's location number 2. We're done with that. Let's move on to location number 3. So here we're by a waterside location. And here we are with our ambient exposure. So if we look at the ambient exposure, we can see here that right away we've got all sorts of problems. Our subject is nicely balanced, properly exposed, but our background is completely gone. So here's where the benefit of having 2 zones of light to work with really comes into play, okay? Because what we need to do is we need to underexpose the entire exposure so we can bring in that background, so we can hold some of the detail in the sky, get some of the information from the architecture that's happening in the background back into the picture. But if we do that, our subject is going to be completely underexposed, right? It makes sense, right? All of this is going to be completely underexposed if we underexpose this, right? So what we need to do is find a way to do both, and that's where Flash comes in. So let's take a look at what happens when we introduce Flash, and there we go. All right. So by introducing Flash, we're able to hold the background, get a detail in the sky. We're able to get all this detail in the buildings. And of course, our subject is properly balanced. So basically how you do this is you underexpose the background by about a stop or 2. And then you bring in your Flash to match that reading. So for example, if we were shooting at f8 or f11, we'd take a meter reading to our Flash to make it the same thing. And we use this fast shutter speed. More often than not, to do this, you're going to use high-speed sync, and you're going to use a shutter speed that is really in excess of your camera's normal sync speed. Now, you can do this with speed lights. For all of you who are going, oh, I don't have that gear. Yes, most flagship model speed lights have that capability, just high-speed sync. It allows you to use a really fast shutter speed. By doing that, you are knocking down the ambient light, you're lowering the ambient light in the exposure, and then you're bringing back in illumination for your subject using strobe. Okay, Very simple technique, but it really makes a massive difference, as you can see here, before and after. Okay, so again, something that you cannot do with ambient light alone. If you just go, oh, I'm just an ambient light shooter, well, that's great, but what do you do in a situation where you have the light that exists on a location like we have here on the exposure on the left? You can see, for my money, the exposure on the right is where I want to end up. All right, let's take a look at our last location. This is location 4. This was in a field, end of the day. This was all shot on the same day, by the way. We just bounced around a couple of different cool locations. So here we have our subject in a field. This is our ambient light exposure. And here is our flash exposure. Okay, so here again we're using our 2 lights. We've got a kicker light in the back with a yellow gel, the CTO gel, just to give us the warmth of the sun, because the sun had kind of gone behind some trees. So we're replicating that look of afternoon sun by using that gel. And then we've got our key light, camera right, same thing, cross light, works every time. Let's take a look at our lighting diagram. There you go. So same thing as before. We've got our background light with our CTO gel. That's giving us all of this illumination and color that you're seeing here, right? Then we've got our key light coming in here, giving us the light that you're seeing here. Now, you can also do this same kind of thing with one light if you have the sun. So sometimes the sun is available as a backlight and you don't need to do that. So if you have that situation, and I'm always looking for that, definitely use it. It's one less light to worry about, one less light to set up, and it really works beautifully. So you can achieve this look with just one light if you have the sun in the back. All right, let's take a look at the gear that was used to create this shoot. What was used for this was 2 inexpensive AD600BM lights. They are Godox lights, and a Godox controller, the XT32C, which you see here, a Ellen Chrome Rotolux 27.5 Deep Octa. This is my go-to lighting modifier on location for 1 and 2 people. It works beautifully. Obviously, you need a speed ring to attach it, which you can see. Let me just get over to my drawing layer, which you can see there. And I was showing these guys how to work with a paint pole to hold your light. I always have an assistant hold the paint pole, and that's what my key light and my modifier is on. Also, 1 lightweight light stand, which you see here. This is a Manfrotto 5000B light stand. I don't think they had this one, but this is the one that I use to set up an accent light if you need it. It's really small. It can fit in a backpack. KC paint pole adapter, and you can see here how it fits onto the paint pole next to that, and that is used to hold the light, so you can have an assistant hold your light, and that's on the paint pole. And then a pack of Roscoe gels, and that's how we had our CTO gel on there. That's how we accomplished our afternoon sun look. All right, so there you go. That's going to wrap it up. I hope that this gets you excited. Here's our before and after. I wanted to finish with that again, just to show you really what you can do and why strobe makes such a difference and why you shouldn't be intimidated by it. It is really simple. Just get out there and experiment and have fun, and don't be afraid to fail. You know, just like experiment and have fun. Come to a workshop, read Shutter Magazine. There's a ton of videos out there. All you're doing is you're balancing strobe and ambient light, and it really, really opens up your world creatively. That's going to wrap it up for this month. I will see you next time here at BehindTheShutter.com.